is the latest Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle, and it tells the story of a man who shows up at a hospital injured, played by Van Damme, who's helped by a nurse when a group of international terrorists show up trying to kill him. All hell breaks loose in the hospital, and Van Damme and the nurse must try to survive. Now, while that describes the actual premise of the movie, the way the story actually unfolds is more in line with the movie The Usual Suspects. Now, if you haven't seen that film, essentially what it means is that our nurse character, played by Reeser, starts off the movie in an FBI investigation room, and they're interrogating her about what happened, and the actual event of the premise that I described to you is told in flashbacks as she's recalling it to these FBI and CIA agents. And throughout the story, sometimes she's an irreliable narrator, sometimes she gets things wrong, sometimes they inform her of things where she was misleading. And so that's kind of the way the story plays out, and it's very much a whodunit of who survived, who's the real good guys, what are people's actual motives, and which side people are generally on as the story unfolds. And with all that said, Van Damme's actually not really the lead in the story. He's kind of the second in the story, whereas this nurse character is the actual lead. And people like Peter Stormare, who plays one of the FBI CIA agents interrogating her, actually has a lot more lines than Van Damme does in the movie. Now, in the action, he's, of course, the star of the action, but as for the dialogue and the story driven forward, it's much more this investigation is where you get a lot more of the dialogue of what's going on. Now, with all that said, this movie is not good at all. Normally in my reviews, I start off by talking about the good, and then I go into the bad, but there's not really much of anything good here. On the basic level, it's short, it's brief, it's to the point, and therefore it moves pretty quickly. There's a lot of flashbacks inside of flashbacks to give little scenes of people's lives, and so the pacing of it moves pretty quickly, so you don't ever necessarily get bored, but at the same time, there's not much here to really enjoy. And I guess it's fair enough that they try to do a Usual Suspects type action, thriller, martial arts film, so you can give it a little bit of credit for that. And then sort of on paper, I can appreciate that it's got a lot of actors that in theory would be nice to be in a film together. So you got Van Damme, so of course I'm always happy about that. You got Peter Stormare, who's one of the, if you don't know that name, he basically plays the sleazy Russian in all kinds of Michael Bay movies and TV shows. Like when you think sleazy Russian, he's the skinny one that comes to your mind. He's the crazy astronaut in Armageddon. So that's who he is. So he's normally fun to see in movies. And then it's got the guy that actually was the lead in Bloodsport 2, 3, and 4 back in the 90s. Daniel Bernhardt, I believe is his name. And so it's nice to see him have a fight with Van Damme, because obviously Van Damme starred in the first Bloodsport, but none of this is actually good. So let's go into the bad. And the movie has about this much plot of guy shows up into a hospital and then wants to survive to the end of the movie. And actually what happens in the hospital is very simplistic. It's like they go up 3 flights of stairs, have a few fight scenes along the way, but they intersplice it with this interrogation footage as well as flashbacks inside of flashbacks to introduce things, because there's just not a lot of character here. The way character development is done is entirely through flashbacks or dialogue. There's a bunch of history type stuff about the fall of Yugoslavia and the wars that broke out over it and how it ties into the motivation of the characters that I'm not really familiar with a lot of the history of that, so I don't even know if it's faithful to what really happened or if it's offensive in its oversimplification of really horrific events that happened. I don't even know, but it's just kind of tossed in there to give motivation to characters. There's a lot of like people talking over montages of footage, and it feels an awful lot like they had to film it really quickly. They couldn't get all their actors in one place at one time, and so it's like, we got this guy, we got Van Damme for a week and a half, and so we'll shoot kind of a couple fight scenes and a couple dialogue scenes, and then we'll shoot Peter Stormare. We've got him for 2 days, and so we'll shoot him a whole bunch in this office saying a bunch of stuff. And so you see a lot of these actors only in one environment, except for this Reeser, the nurse character. Other than her, everyone else is only kind of in one environment for the most part. And it feels very disjointed in the way it all fits together. The twists and turns in it are all pretty obvious. They're projected pretty far out and not enticing or engaging. But most importantly, this is an action thriller. It's a martial arts movie. And the action's not shot well, and the martial arts aren't impressive. And I don't want to blame the martial artists in this, because they'll seem perfectly capable in what they're trying to do, but it's all choppy, it's all cut to pieces the way it's put together, in which case you're not like, oh, that was a cool fight. It was just like, okay, someone threw a punch and there's 3 cuts in it. They reared back and then we cut to like this and then we cut to the person falling down. And so 3 cuts inside of a second for 1 punch, and everything kind of played out with that choppy sort of fight style, which I hate. So even on the level to which this just needs to deliver action that I like, it doesn't even do that. There's really just nothing here to enjoy. It passes time pretty quickly. It's short. But even kind of Van Damme, for the most of the movie, he has a head, or no, the whole movie has a head injury. And so it's just like, oh. And then bad guys show up and he like fights them and beats guys up and then goes back, oh. Or later in it, he's, that's his whole acting in the movie, is acting like he's injured, tired, or out of breath the whole movie. That's his whole performance the entire time, is looking ill. Peter Stormare, who's normally a pretty good sleazy character, just is awkward. The way the scenes are played out, like they weren't directed well, so that the nurse character plays the interrogation scenes one way, Peter Stormare plays them another way, and then there's this other lady and they're all like on a different page, and so the scenes just feel weird and cringy, like in, the first night at acting class or something like that. They're trying to figure out how to do all this, and so it's just very uncomfortable to watch. All that to say, this isn't one you need to see. I wouldn't recommend it at all. I'd only give this a 3 out of 10. It passes time, but not well. It's not fun. And if I'm being honest, it's not even worth Redbox. It's not worth checking out. If it comes out on Netflix, you can skip on this one. There's much better films by all of these actors. There's much better action thrillers. Don't waste your time on this one. How about you? Have you seen this one? Tell me what you thought down below. Was I wrong? Was there something enjoyable here that I just kind of missed? Because the action didn't work for me. The plot was bare bones, and the big twists and turns in the third act felt very basic, simplistic, predictable type twist where you're like, I know there's going to be a twist. I think I know where this is going, and for the most part, I was pretty right in where it went. Anyway, with all that said, if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, as well as this thing called Masters of Movie Trivia, where I do a movie trivia show with some other YouTubers to see who the, master of movie trivia is. With all that said, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.